thank you for coming this evening. So as I was saying, this is the sixth seminar. Brunel University has funded it as part of their kind of the Arts, Health, Social Change research group that I currently chair. And we hope to have another seminar series next year. And in a way, this is culminating in quite a significant event, as we'll hear throughout the evening. My name is Havsteen-Franklin. I'm Professor of Practice in Art Therapies at Brunel University and a consultant in Art Therapies in CNWL NHS Foundation Trust with my colleagues. So, when I first thought about the seminar series, when I designed it, it was as a series for community and learning across health and the arts disciplines. This was at the forefront of my thinking. The fact that we're ending with the Grenfell team is an amazing achievement. This seminar, in a way, provides an awareness of the complexity of contextual factors that build and limit capacities to see how the arts can play such a vital role within communities. The philosopher Deleuze coined the term ecologic, which demands a new way of seeing relations on a more interactive level, from the micro interaction to the kind of global positioning. As Zach Horton states, ecology must be more than a discourse about objects in the world. It must be a discourse about processes. This requires discourse itself to be rendered processual, contingent, deterritorialized. Change occurs in social ecologies, natural ecologies, and ideational ecologies. To attend to that change, as I believe we've been doing and many others, the Grenfell community, is to participate in its flows. So the Grenfell fire, there's many people online who've heard something about it but don't know the kind of history. It started from an overheating freezer, they believe, on the 4th floor, which quickly engulfed the entire tower within 2 hours. Tragically, 72 lives were lost. Many families and children were deeply traumatized. The disaster highlighted severe social injustices as the government commissioned cladding intended to reduce heat loss ultimately revealed systemic failures in the construction, governance, and management. Insufficient financial and resource allocations for Grenfell's safety underscored the prioritization of governmental and business interests over residents' well-being. The building was not adequately fireproofed. And in the event of a fire, nothing could prevent the devastating spread. Obviously, the kind of capitalism kind of background and socio-political situation had a big influence. There was something at the time called framework agreements, which people may know about. Which makes it very difficult to decide who was accountable. But the issues that have unfolded have become highly situated. They're very much to do with this community. The healing and recovery necessitates the diverse perspectives, the different organizations, the peoples, the voices, the innovation, the collaboration. The healthcare sector responded as one organization, the creation of the Grenfell Wellbeing Service. From its inception, I was clinically supervising the art therapists and their roles for adults, pursuing adults and, as art therapists, as they traversed locations, roles, methods of engagement and understanding. Intersections of systemic, dynamic, and arts-based practices extended far beyond the clinical room. They drew new alignments with cultures, new definitions of trauma. With their colleagues across disciplines, our speakers today will introduce themselves shortly, have been at the forefront of supporting the recovery process alongside other organisations with the Grenfell community. This, of course, has not been an easy task, as is always the case with new developments and innovation. There's always an element of trial and error. Partly the scale of the impact was unknown. What was discovered whilst there were people directly affected, secondary trauma had triggered unsettled people and devastated the community, stemming from exposure to the effects of the disaster. But in my view, the traditional concept of secondary trauma underestimates the complexity of the affects. Trauma is not only the result of interactions at a personal level. I remember visiting in 2017, shortly after the fire, and there was a kind of palpable atmosphere. There weren't many people around, but you could kind of feel it in the walls and the notices, the ways, just in the kind of atmosphere, kind of being in that space. I felt, it affected me quite deeply. There's much more about individuals, something about the whole kind of context and place and situatedness was deeply affecting everybody. There's no one individual that could say, it's just affected me. It was the whole situation. The experience of trauma was deeply felt. The definition reimagined, events were reconstructed, serving as a unifying factor despite its devastation. The tower was home to people from diverse backgrounds. In recent years, artists have embraced the community, creating works that bring these realities to the forefront. This is Christopher Philly's image in the Tate at the moment, an ongoing piece. So new aesthetics and collective experiences emerged, challenging conventional understandings. As Stephen Zagala explains, this is through a philosopher called Guattari, through his perspective, the ways in which we understand aesthetics through the arts is not just about creating art, but about constructing positionality and affects as they are lived. It's being with, not representing, but being with. And I think from that perspective. So it explains that aesthetics, this is quoting Zagala, aesthetics isn't something that gives you recipes to make a work of art. It is a speculative cartography which constructs coordinates of existence at the same time as those coordinates are lived. In this sense, more than any other medium, for lack of a better word, the arts provide a way of being with, in, and of the situation to help us to articulate and express events, affects, and geographies in ways that preconceptions and clearly demarcated ideas never quite inside the event itself. The arts draw us in and help us to sense make. And through this action, we discover what will mobilize recovery, social cohesion, the realization of feelings personally and within the community. And of course, we're talking about all arts, dance, music, theatre, drama, visual, and the capacity to relate to the situatedness of relational expression. Another philosopher, Elizabeth Gross, writes, each of the arts, as highly particular in their historical and regional specificity as it might be, aims to capture something equally accessible to all of the other arts, a kind of foundation or unity. It's a kind of beautiful statement there. Equally accessible to all of the other arts, a kind of foundation or unity. So in this sense, the arts are utilized through art therapists and many other practitioners to generate exactly that sense of foundational unity required by Grenfell. This is a brave endeavour where we allow the patient experience to permeate our own worlds, to meet us as both patients with our own affections and as therapists. So really, those boundaries between being a patient and therapist are much more, let's say, open, as a therapist in this context. So really trying to bridge scales of experience from personal, family, social, community, political, even global. The situatedness of the arts allows this to happen. In other words, art therapists stand at the edge of this endeavour to produce healing change, themselves patients and extraordinary therapists, in the acts of providing art therapies practices alongside many other practices. Transversing spaces, practices, theories, and embodied experiences is intrinsic to the roles of these art therapists. Having clinically supervised the arts therapists working with adults with Grenfell since the service's inception, I've witnessed their profound impact. There's no manual for this work. There's no single approach that suits everyone. Yet the art therapists that we have here are effectively engaged with the core issues troubling the Grenfell community by sensitively adapting their roles and perspectives. The art of being present and fostering constructive emergence is a testament to their excellence. As Haraway aptly put it, they excel in staying with the trouble. In my supervisory role, I've aimed to create a space that encourages the processes of being present, uncovering affects, and navigating the intersections of political, social, and personal narratives within therapeutic settings. Thank you. So this evening, we're going to hear from the therapists and some community members, something around what the journey has been like, and from their perspectives. Obviously, the Grenfell Wellbeing Service was at the centre of this, helping to facilitate the therapeutic services. But as I said, it's definitely been a learning process, right? It's been something, right? It's been something where every step has been a little uncertain, at times. And it's now found a place where you can reflect on this as a journey, which is, like I said, a real achievement. So I'm going to hand you over to Abby, Lucy, even. How are we doing for time? I'll bring up the Pretzi now, I think.
Yeah, we just need the present. Hi everyone, I'm Lucy. We're just going to need to play the video first. We thought there's plenty of songs that have been created since Grenfell, but we picked one of the many. There were plenty, so if you search YouTube, you'll find them all. But we picked one, so hopefully they'll put it on soon. So to introduce myself, I'm Lucy. I am a resident of Nottingdale since I was 3 months old. And I'm now the community collaboration lead in the Grenfell Health and Wellbeing Service, but I wasn't always in the NHS. I've used to run pubs and restaurants in the area. But I was in headquarters in HR before the fire for about 9 months, and then was pulled into the service to sort of help build the service about 5 weeks after the fire. But you'll hear a little bit more about that in a minute. We just wanted to explain a little bit of why we were doing this seminar, like why now, and why this seminar particularly. For the first few years in the service, we were obviously focused on developing the service and making sure that we were listening and responding to the community. And whilst we were being asked quite a lot to write things up and to share things, especially after the terrorist attacks in New Zealand and various other things, disasters across the world, we focused on kind of doing the work and kind of trying to get it right, I suppose. So we didn't write anything really. A couple of things came out, but they took a long time. And so now we knew that we needed to be part of this legacy, and we've had a lot of we've heard very clearly from the community that we have responsibility to ensure that things within the NHS and maybe wider have a chance to change and can learn anything that we have so far. We're not perfect, but it was we're taking steps to kind of think about how we involve community in the work that we do, how we can share power more, which is really important to me. And so when we received the invite, we thought it was important to do it, but wanted to also ensure that we had community voice and experience throughout it. As we have in the service, as I said, I'm a community member. We also have, now about 20 to 25% of our service are people from the community, from the KNC community or just outside. And so we've invited to the panel, but we've also put a list of resources to share with you at the end, and hopefully that will come out on the link. that highlight all the other amazing people and organisations who since day one have responded to the disaster and has been using the arts to bring the community together, heal and work towards the recovery. So, by no means did we want everyone to think that we're the only people doing art therapy or using art for mental health in the area. And for me, it's very important that we always remember to bring in the community. I do a walk for any new staff members and people like directors and everything in our area to give a bit of the history of the community. And we can't do that here because it takes 2 hours. But I can give you a little bit of a whip through some of the things that we talk about still now. So the north of the borough has always been, shall we say, less well off than the south of the borough. And in the 1800s, it was mainly consisting of brickmakers, stables and piggeries and people living and working alongside pretty diabolical slums. And by 1849, the community around what is now like sort of Avondale Park and Pottery Lane was in such a state that child mortality was at 87% and the average life expectancy had sunk to 11 years and 7 months, while the rest of London averaged 37 years. It was so bad that in 1850, Charles Dickens called the area formerly known as Cutthroat Lane a plague spot scarcely equalled for its insalubrity by any other in London. And the outputs of all these people and industries meant that the holes in the area became filled with stagnant water, sewage and pig slurry, one of which was dubbed the ocean, that it was so big, which is where we think Avondale Park is now. So there was also a race course called the Hippodrome, built in 1837, that was intended to rival Ascot and Epsom. However, on its opening, the Times described it as a disgusting petty botheration and cried shame upon the people of Kensington for permitting it. It didn't last long, as you could imagine, and it had a public footpath through it, which meant it was easy access for all the sort of community members to take over. The route of the racecourse is still visible, and one of the kilns used to fire the bricks and tiles has been turned into a house that is still inhabited today. Moving on into the 90s and 50s and 60s, a key part of the history of the area was, the Notting Hill race riots, which were preceded by a few well-known events in our area. Because following the Second World War, as a result of the losses during the war, the British government began to encourage mass immigration from the various territories of the British Empire and later the Commonwealth to fill shortages in the labour market. As a result, Afro-Caribbean immigration to Britain increased. And if you've read any of Alan Johnson's, who's a Labour MP, any of his autobiographies, he talks about living in the slums and growing up in the shared housing and the ovens being on the top of the stairs that everyone shared, and kind of just the tensions that were rising with such terrible state of housing in our area and more people coming in all the time. But by the 1950s, a gang of white working class teens posed as teddy boys were beginning to display hostility towards the black families in the area. But these teddy boys weren't necessarily from the area, they were coming outside, from outside, and they would come and target the Afro-Caribbean residents. And in 1958, the violent attacks on black people really ramped up throughout the summer. And on the 24th of August, a group of 10 English youths committed serious assaults on 6 West Indian men in 4 separate incidents. And then 5 days later, a Swedish woman called Madge-Britt Morrison was arguing with her Jamaican husband at Latimer Road tube station, which is my road. And a group of white people attempted to intervene in the argument, and a small fight broke out between the intervening people and some of their friends. The following day, the lady, Madge-Britt Morrison, was verbally and physically assaulted by a gang of white youths that had recalled seeing her the night before. And the incident was seen as one of the triggers for the race riots, as later that night, a mob of 300 to 400 white people were seen on Bramley Road attacking the houses of West Indian residents. And the disturbances, rioting attacks continued every night until the 6th of September. So 140 people were arrested during the 2 weeks, mostly white youths, but also some black people found carrying weapons. And they ended on the 5th of September, 6th of September. However, the next year, Kelso Cochrane, a carpenter originally from Antigua, was attacked whilst walking home shortly after midnight on the 17th of May in 1959. And he was set upon by a gang of white youths, thought to be teddy boys, and a lot of people know who they are, but haven't said, and they never went. They feared repercussions, but they stabbed him with a stiletto knife, and he ended up being taken to St Charles Hospital, which is where we all work now, and the Grenfell service is based. As a result of these kind of rising escalations, the Caribbean Carnival, which was the precursor to the Notting Hill Carnival, was held on the 30th of January in 1959 in St Pancras Town Hall. And the activist Claudia Jones organised the carnival in response to the riots and to the state of the race relations in Britain at the time, and to celebrate Caribbean culture in the face of hate from white racists. To see more about this, because we can't go through everything, there's a brilliant film by Colin Prescott. It's in the resources, and it celebrates the legacy of struggles and organising and the birth of the UK civil rights movements from the Mangrove Nine to the beginnings of Notting Hill Carnival. And it kind of, sort of tells you the route. I'm going to speed up. Can I have the next slide, please? But I thought that these bits are the important bits that I talk about in the walk, so I can't really miss them out, because it's still, these things still impact us today, and they're the stories that I grew up hearing as a person that lives here, and many others have, lots of different stories that intermingle with these. In there, these pictures is the Mangrove restaurant, which is a legendary Caribbean restaurant on All Saints Road. We've got Frank Critchlow there as well, who's got a blue plaque. Now it's a bar now, but it was on All Saints Road, which is known as the Front Line, and it was founded in 1968. The restaurant closed in 1992, but it was known for the trial for a group of Black British activists dubbed the Mangrove Nine, who were tried for inciting a riot in 1970. Protest against the police targeting the restaurant. They kept raiding the restaurant for crap reasons, deliberately to intimidate the community. But their high-profile trial in 1971 lasted for 2 months, and 5 of the defendants being completely acquitted. But the main thing is the case made legal history when it delivered the first judicial acknowledgement of the evidence of racial hatred in the Metropolitan Police Force. Again, there's lots of resources in the end of this presentation, so that you can kind of have a look for all of the different things. But one of them, Steve McQueen did a recent one called Small Axe, which was really good. The other part of this in the 70s is Frestonia, which is where I grew up. And we had our own country. It was declared independent from around 1977. They had visa stamps, theatre, art galleries, and then everyone changed their last name to Bramley, so that if it all went pear-shaped, they would have to house over 100 people as a family. And there's many newspaper articles of various things, but the top right-hand corner, no one's ever seen this picture because it's my dad knocking out a window because he wanted more light in his squat. And so did my mum, to be fair. They met there. But you can see some of the artwork as well. That is now the Mutoid Waste Group company. Now takes to Glastonbury, and they're still around, and they do Carmageddon. So there's some really fabulous things. But we gave the country back in the end when I was born. And now we've got houses and flats, and we run it as a housing co-op. Cool. Can I have the next slide, please? So Kensington and Chelsea today. Again, you can look at this at your leisure. This is from the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment that's very recent. But we've got 36% of residents identify as being from a Black, Asian, or other non-white background. 1 in 25 identify as LGBTQ plus. 65% of residents have a religion. We're the smallest London borough, but significant differences from north to south, which is well illustrated by the life expectancy gap. So whilst men can expect to live 17 years longer in Queensgate Ward, which is in the south, rather than Nottingdale, which is where Grenfell Tower was, the women in Holland Ward live 18 years longer than those in Nottingdale. So it's significant differences there, and it's just gone up. It's not even, it's not even getting better. After Goulburn, Nottingdale is the second most deprived ward in K&C and the 9th most deprived in London. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick context of the service, because it's obviously been nearly 7 years, maybe a bit longer. But in the immediate aftermath of the fire, many of our CNWL colleagues were out and responding, as CNWL was the provider of CAMs, CMHTs, the mental health wards, talking therapies as well, so community living well. But no one had a uniform, and though so many people would not have noticed them, but we had staff members, doing overtime from all of the other services in hotels, hostels, like all of the rest centres. 24-hour cover we had, and that was set up pretty rapidly, because by the time I came into the service, 5 weeks after the fire, outreach was already recruited to. And my next job was to coordinate the recruitment for the adult therapies team, and then the children's, help with the children's a bit later. So you can see we had 3 teams at the beginning. And this was to start a screen and treat approach, which was what was identified as after a disaster, that is what people should do. So that means that you find all the people that might be affected, and then you screen them. And then if they need it, you treat them. And that can be organised in many different ways. But for us, it was for door knocking, because it was a stable population in one place, whereas that wouldn't quite work in other disasters. Other disasters have used TV adverts and all sorts of things to find those people, whereas we could door knock. So the data at the bottom there is, you can just see it. It's we door knocked over 35,000 doors. They spoke to over 18,500 people. Of them, they screened about just over 10,000 for trauma, and then just over 2,500 of those were then referred into the service, and that was in the first 18 months. So after that changed approach, we had a lot of feedback that it wasn't very culturally competent, that that we were asking quite private things on doorsteps, and needed translated materials, people that spoke different languages. So but also we would never have got a lot of people that I know in, because some people had to be convinced that they weren't taking resource from other people that needed it more, and we could let them know. And a lot of people came in afterwards as well, so that people weren't ready at the time. So that was kind of the beginning and the setup. And then after that, we've piloted a Grenfell Recovery College. We've brought in service user consultants, both adults and child. We've ended the proactive screening approach, and changed our website, and also the model we transformed. And we now have a community collaboration team that is going out there to develop mental health interventions with the community, but we've also got a 5-part model recognising the holistic nature of what we need to do. So we've hired more social workers, occupational therapists, mental health nursing, arts therapists, and so to provide a kind of all-around service, rather than just strictly treat for trauma and that's it, because I think that's what a lot of people assumed that people would do, but it's not what's needed. I'm going to hand over to Abby, who will talk specifically about the arts therapies, but that's a bit of background. I hope that was helpful. If I don't do that, people ask all the time later, so I thought I'd better do it now.
Hi, my name is Abby, and I'm an art psychotherapist, and I know we haven't all introduced ourselves, so do we want to do that now? Yeah, okay, great. So I'm an art psychotherapist. I've also worked leading arts and health for the trust since 2012, and I've worked within this service since November 2017.
Thanks. I'm Matteo, and I'm also a psychotherapist, coming from adult inpatient mental health, but I've joined the service in the really beginning with Abby, and I've been working here since then. It's a pleasure to be here tonight.
Hi, I'm Ursula. I am another art psychotherapist. I joined the Grenfell service in January 22, and before that I had worked in the community, primarily in arts and health projects.
Hi, I'm Yara, dance movement psychotherapist, and I joined with Ursula January 2022, and I work full-time in the service.
Hi, my name is Iman. I work for an organization called Al Hassaniya Moroccan Women's Center. I'm a psychotherapist, but also I work since 2017. Also, I joined the Grenfell Health and Wellbeing Service in 2018, providing mainly Arabic-speaking psychotherapy for those who have language barriers.
Hi, I'm Sarunia. I'm not an art psychotherapist. I have been receiving art psychotherapy. I'm a local resident and I witnessed the Grenfell Tower fire.
Okay, so apart from being quite nervous and worried that I'm gonna like fluff all the words that I think that might come out of my mouth, so apologies in advance, but I'm gonna do a little bit of a kind of an experiential kind of view and look of where we started and what the kind of things that we've been doing. And my colleagues are going to interrupt me if I miss anything out, and also if anything that you guys want to say in addition. And firstly, so I the art psychotherapy started within Grenfell Health and Wellbeing from the very beginning in terms of conversations that the art psychotherapies were having, especially Claire Grant, who was the lead of art psychotherapies in Kensington and Chelsea. And she kind of spoke to the people who were setting up Grenfell Health and Wellbeing Service, but also spoke to her colleagues within CNWL. So obviously Matteo was one of the people that Lucy mentioned earlier who took up kind of shifts working in outreach from the very beginning. And we also were kind of thinking about how we could input, how we could support the arts therapies organisations in the community, and also other community kind of inputs and organisations. Oh, thanks. Sorry, one sec. Okay. Sorry, just a brief pause. I think Dominic's saying something. Is there, can I carry on or?
Yeah, I think so. Check online, I can see if it's okay.
Check the chat, maybe?
Yes, okay. Good.
No, yeah, so we were attending meetings within the community and seeing how we could support the various different organizations that were in the area. So I was joined with to run and co-facilitate an art therapy group within the community for adults with Elaine Gulliver, and this was in the November of 2017, and it was set up by Elaine, and it was on the kind of back of collaboration that we formed together. And this is actually an image from something that I made within the group, and it kind of just gives you an idea of the fact that we worked with Akava in collaboration and with Elaine, and this group was run I think every Wednesday all the way up until 2020, from when it was set up in July, I believe. And what we started to do with Claire was to think about ways that we could impact and work with the staff that were already in the Grenfell, what was going to be set up as the Grenfell Health and Wellbeing Service. And primarily we were kind of thinking about how we could work using the arts, and but also with engagement. So alongside kind of clinical work and
working where we could, seeing where we could input in terms of clinical work. We also worked in the outreach team, which is I joined, which is Natalia. So we have kind of caseload outreach clients, but we also were looking at kind of creating, and I'll say a bit more about this in a minute, the kind of arts engagement model. And so one of the ways that we inputted and worked within the team at Grenfell Health and Wellbeing Service was thinking about how we could use our skills as clinicians, but working quite creatively within our caseload within outreach. And we worked with bereaved survivors and local community members. I'll just explain this slide because it's a little bit confusing, but this was from a piece of work that I was involved in with a couple of other staff about thinking about the amount of kind of professionals that were involved with people who were immediately affected by the fire, so survivors or bereaved. So people, you know, you obviously have your kind of your GP and your work and your friends, but you know, and your family and your children, but then suddenly people who have this extremely affected, deeply affected by fire, suddenly had this whole new world of people that they were engaging. So, for example, family liaison officers attending the inquiry, therapists, like the NHS outreach worker, project managers that were involved with housing, the key workers, the housing officers, the resettlement team, also if they were part of Grenfell United as well. So this is kind of a project that we were piloting in around about 2018, 2019. For example, when I was working with someone who was a survivor who was just thinking about the scale that it's going to take her to move from her hotel, which she was in for 18 months, to her home. And not only the amount of people that she was then, you know, coming in contact with and who were professionals that she had to try and show, but also the fact that setting up a home and the thousands of decisions that had to be made. So this is just a small kind of creative project that I suppose we were involved in terms of having people settle in their new house, which wasn't a home yet. So it was about kind of creating a home together and supporting them. So I'm just going to give you kind of a few examples of some projects that we were involved in. This is a bit more collaborative and art and health based. So one was a collaboration with Akava, where we kind of collaborated with them from the beginning, and we had different artists participate in leading, like in the summer of 2018, different artistic projects and workshops that were at the Curve, which is the community centre. Oh, they can't hear. Sorry. Yeah, and so it was at the Curve, but also at the Studio One. So the art therapy team then, towards the kind of start of 2018, we were joined by Laura Knight, the drama therapist, Sally Anderson, drama therapist, but also Claire Grant was joining us and was working as a music therapist as well. So we were kind of all balancing our like art therapy caseload or therapy caseload with also more community engagement projects. So this was I think the North Kensington Youth Festival that we were involved in. Some kind of graffiti workshops that we were involved in, and kind of clay workshops that we led with the Curve. So the idea was that we were working kind of within different organisations, different partnerships, and kind of having this accessible way of working, so that we then have conversations with people. So like Lucy said, the street screening was one way of kind of finding out how people were, and this was another way. So So these are some of the workshops that occur, but I'm going to just kind of rush through these. Yeah, so we had some music, a mother and I can't see it from there. Why am I looking there? So a parent and carer and infants music group run by music therapists, some clay workshops and body percussion workshops and puppetry workshops, drama and clay workshops at the Curve. But we also provided space for our colleagues for reflection and reflection around the anniversary. So obviously then there was COVID, and we worked in person but also online. And there was another collaboration that we did with ACAVA, which was about resilience, working with families, about what they found they'd really gained from resilience in their family unit, and we created an animation project with them. Speak up, okay. Was there anything else that I missed so far in terms of kind of that early part and anything that you
No, I
want to
think
add?
you covered quite well everything. Yeah.
So this was one, like there are so many different examples, and we'll talk more about them, especially with what we'll talk about later. This is a little bit of a project that kind of continued the flavour of like how our environment affects us, and this was a project that we created about 18 months ago, where we invited all the clients that we work with, and also people who have participated in our in our service, to come and create artworks together for our space. And we had 2 artists working with us, and we had, I think, about 35 people who created artworks over a period of months, and created a completely new exhibition of artworks that were created by our participants and members of our community. Those works are in our service now. So that's kind of a bit more information. There's a before and an after, and a photo from the actual workshop. But I think it gives you a little flavour, and I'm if I have missed out things, please do say. But we now are going to move into a panel discussion, and we'll probably cover more and answer more questions as well.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe just if we stop for a moment is it okay if we stop for a moment just to get questions? Because in a way, you've, in a very sort of humble, understated way, you've covered 7 years of, if not more, of work, right? Of quite complex arrangements of different projects and activities and events and so forth. And I sort of feel like these are quite significant. They've got lots of engagement. If at this stage anybody has any questions, anybody online have any questions at this stage?
I did have one, but it's not very formulated.
Yeah.
It was just what was the learning that you had, because from the people that you were working with in the community, in terms of, because you talked about it being a step-by-step process. I think Lucy gave this really detailed discussion of the kind of history of the local area, which I found really, really interesting, and about this kind of working things out as you went along, really working at a grassroots level. But what did you learn from the community? I know I can see that it's an incredible, lots of work went into it. But just what was your learning? Because I want to kind of know more about the community as well.
So what I think might be useful at this point then is to go into a panel, because that's a big question. I think each panel member could answer in their own way, and so if we can reorganize ourselves slightly, I might turn this. Can we turn the? What's that? Yeah. But I'm just wondering, because then the people online might not be able to. Yeah, we put lights on, I think. Yeah.
Because
So
it just
what do we
sounded like, you know, from Lucy's description, there was this description of this
Yeah.
process of trauma upon trauma upon trauma, and then
Yeah.
there was this kind of incredibly sort of defining moment of trauma, and I just wondered, yeah, just because I can see that a huge amount of work went into it, that there was a huge amount of dedication. But what did you learn by being in the community directly? What mistakes did you think you made, or what process of learning was there for you and the team?
I think it's a really
Well,
good question, Paula. Yeah, I wonder if we
can
can
I
just bring
just
ourselves around a little bit into a circle, the people in the hall, just to kind of make it more of a sense of in it together kind of feel.
while they're doing that, I was just going to say that we're sharing mine and a couple of other staff members. What do we call it? Document book, something like
There's
this.
more, more
That
chairs
took
here. There's more
about
chairs here
5
if you want
years.
to come around.
Um,
Yeah, that's great. So we've got a bit of a circle going.
It took about 5 years to do. And a lot of it's got learnings in it, but it's not specifically arts therapy. So there's the general kind of learning stuff. Over 5 years, we stopped at transformation because we could have gone on forever, and then I would have been writing forever. So this is a bit of a top up, really, to then being more specific. So they're probably going to talk more about learning specifically around arts therapy and approaches and stuff. But yeah, we'll share the link afterwards of the general journey of the service, which we wrote because people did ask some of the learnings, and it's done by learning points.
I mean, I don't want to change the way that you've organised it, obviously, but
It's good.
it was just the pictures, you know, when they were held up.
Yeah.
See, it's been quite a journey, and as I said before, there was some trial and error, and you know, it's like it's going towards the end of a journey now, right? And I guess one of the questions that Paula put forward and Lucy answered to some extent. Well, I'm thinking particularly from the arts therapies perspective now, but what was the learning? If there was one big learning point looking back, you know, what was something you learned and responded to?
There's yes, Grenfell is a huge part of it, but there's also the histories that people come with before that, and since it with COVID and everything, we're working with so much more than just Grenfell.
You mean in terms of Grenfell Fine?
Yeah. And the trauma that comes from that. There's intergenerational trauma from before it. There's so many other things that kind of come into the work as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that there have been many different kind of learning, also depending on the time that we're looking at. So in the beginning, there was something around, you know, therapy getting a little bit, some people were saying less boundaries, you know, learning how to kind of work a little bit outside the therapy room a little bit, and going to the community, which is already for someone like me, because everyone is different, that they come from inpatient work. So it was a big changing and a lot of learning. This is really kind of changed me as a practitioner, as a way I practice art therapy. But then there was also this aspect, the aspect that we feel privileged in a way that I was able to work for a very long time with an individual, with, you know, a small group, a family, because also my role evolved over time. You know, I joined with Abby in the very beginning, and I was an art therapist already, and I used art therapy, but I was employed as an outreach worker. So the role of the art, it would be half of my day, but there was a lot of engagement as well, and I had to rely on creativity in a sense. I learned that as well, which was special. Get to know the people, their life stories, a little bit like Ursula was saying, and a little bit also after a few years, it went a little bit also beyond Grenfell in a sense. Yeah, Grenfell was at the center, and it still is for many families and many people in the community. Sometimes we feel like almost towards the end of a journey, but maybe us and with some of my clients, you know, not really there yet. And there is, you know, inquiry and all of that in criminal investigation really at the moment. So it's still kind of ongoing. So we are not really in the end, in a sense. And I've learned that as well, you know, my limitation as a practitioner, as an art therapist, as an NHS worker, how much, you know, you really to kind of change the kind of stance and almost, you know, learning in a sense. That was funny, but it's learning, you know. And yeah, and then now for me personally, you know, I'm still want to work in the service. I would still, you know, I'm still happy where I am, and I continue to kind of learn from my clients, from the community, from the many collaboration we did with the community organization, which I think it wouldn't be possible our work without them. And we learned so much from them because they were already around for years before, or they were formed soon after the fire. They really offered something that we could even thinking about offer or conceptualize because we were not from there. Although, you know, we worked in the area before, but we were not from there. So but yeah, I'm gonna move on because I could talk for excited, sorry.
Could somebody say a bit more about that? Because you mentioned going into the community, right? This was a new thing for you.
Yeah.
But what is a community? What in this context? What do you mean by community? Maybe somebody else might.
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
representing the community. So
Yeah,
the
yes.
extent,
What does that mean?
yeah. I mean, the learning is the important role of the community and the collaboration with the NHS. I think we've learned that not one service fits all. A lot of people with cultural background couldn't access the services that were there for them, simply because there were a lot of cultural barriers. And so the role of the community is to kind of create, in my experience, we've created a unique service designed for these people, not using a mainstream service that was offered by the NHS, simply because people have language barriers and they have less understanding of therapeutic work, and they were left with PTSD symptoms, not knowing what to do and suffering in silence. So our role in the community was to reach out to these people because they didn't have the confidence or the knowledge to reach us to us. So we reached out to them using outreach and using even the therapy service. We went to them rather than waiting for them to come to us. And the reason why, because they lost their homes, they were placed in hotels, and they were just preoccupied by their basic needs. They didn't even think about their psychological trauma or any problem and grief at that moment. They were just thinking of where they're going to go, and that was the preoccupation. So we had to go to them. There was this center was created for them. I think it's called The Curve. We all went there. It's a place where a lot of affected people, victims, family victims, and survivors used to go there to get their needs met. In terms of housing and other stuff that was important for them. So we created a unique service first to establish the trust and rapport, then offer that unique service in their own language. So I'm going to go on to that later, what kind of therapy we offered to them. But if anyone else would like to say something.
I wonder if it is a good transition into the questions that we had anyway for the panel discussion, because part of it is the Hand of Hope project that I collaborated with Al Hassaniya with, and I learned a lot from there. So maybe as we talk a bit more about it, I can also share my learnings from it. Yeah, should we?
Yeah.
Switch gears.
So we're going to go back to the trustee or no?
Yeah.
So we go back to that. Okay.
Please.
Okay. So so there are some questions that you kind of want to be asked, right? These are kind of things that are on your mind that are important to the process.
And I think they also came up from our discussion as
Yeah.
a group.
Okay, so something that emerged in this recently. This kind of things that are important to talk about. So the first question is about what is your experience of the function of the art medium and the therapeutic work you've been part of? So what role does arts really play as a kind of physical, material phenomena, whether it's the body or images or other forms? So what's relevant about that? Why have that? Yeah, why not? Yeah, that'd be great. Do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Hi, I'm Sarunia. I'm talking not from a art psychotherapy background, but I receive art therapy now. I witnessed the Grenfell Tower fire. So in the straight after it happened, I had PTSD symptoms. So for me, I actually went to the Curve, and as you mentioned, and the Curve was a really good space because I was pregnant when the fire happened, and post that had but the Curve had a crash. So that for me was massive at the time because I went to the Curve for kind of respite. My daughters were in the crash, and then while I was there, and I think this speaks to your kind of outreach engagement element, it was suggested that I access some therapy because of my symptoms. So at that time, I accessed 12 weeks of PTSD therapy, talking therapy, basically, which was a space for me to be able to talk about what had happened outside of my family and my friends and basically the other members of the community who were ultimately as traumatized as I was. So it kind of felt very much like if I spoke about it, I think everyone was so fragile that it was, if you speak about what happened, they would then break down, then everyone would be breaking down. So I think it was just a space for me to be able to actually talk about what happened at the time. And I had, I had nightmares, the kind of typical PTSD symptoms. Every time I walked past the fire, I had panic attacks, anxiety attacks, would be crying, etc. So for me, the immediate response of PTSD therapy was really helpful. But subsequently, about a year later, I really needed something which went beyond that to process. And I think this is where Ursula's point comes in, that the fire was one thing, but it's beyond that, in that people all come with histories and past and past traumas. So accessing art therapy for me gave me a space to unpack that. And that's my piece there.
Oh, the bottom left.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I don't know if you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so this is 8 months worth of therapy, art therapy. Big up my therapist. So I think for me initially, the kind of what I would say is resistance to therapy was the concept of just sitting in a room opposite someone talking. I really was like, this is not for me. So bringing in art materials really kind of broke down those boundaries and barriers, I think, and helped us form a relationship. So
what was it about the art materials? I mean, what?
I think it externalizes a lot of what, like, the inner workings of my psyche. So it kind of takes it away from focusing on how do you feel about this thing, as opposed to let's just do something, and then stuff comes up, and then in the process it's easier to reflect on that and to talk about feelings.
How do you feel about looking at the image now?
Well, in the process of 8 months, I basically had a safe enough space to realised that I am neurodivergent, which kind of, I think before this point, I don't know if I would have got to the point where I'm now accepting of my neurodivergence. So for me, that's been huge. And I think the role of materials and art in that has been a big aspect. And just kind of looking at that image, it's very colourful and very busy. And for me, that's taken a long time to kind of accept. So yeah, I think also you can see elements of fire and water there. And maybe some womb space, possibly. But yeah, it's kind of, we did it as one piece over 8 months. So yeah, okay. I don't know if that answers the question.
It does, yeah. There is some element, as you said, of the fire, but what is really struck me is the energy that comes across from the space, and which links for me, it was about, the power of art for processing, of course, but also because, thinking about, underlying what you were saying, thinking about something, it can kind of get us stuck, but sometimes our hands can actually resolve something, without necessarily thinking and talking about. So for me, there was that empowering of the arts. And of course, I've been using arts for myself since I remember, to kind of, remain, in a sense, healthy in a way, but also I was shocked, not shocked, positively shocked. I remember in the early days, and there was a group of children doing some art, and it wasn't really about Grenfell, but there was this drawing that really stayed with me, and it was a princess stuck on a tower, and there was this very long hair, what's the name of this Rapunzel? But this hair, they were blonde, and they were going down this tower all the way from the top to the bottom, and she must have been like 5 years old, and that just stayed with me. I don't think I need to say more about it, but it was a very beautiful moment. Yeah.
Mhm. So, in terms of the art that we implemented in our work, I mean, I've been working with the community since the tragedy has begun, and we've been offering different interventions like talking therapy, but we've identified that people were not engaging in talking simply because they didn't have the ability to articulate their feelings and emotions in words. So because we were in the curve, we were offering the service in the curve, we've realized that people are missing the gathering, and so we started thinking about creating a co-produced model which is called the Hand of Hope, in a group setup with the Grenfell Health and Wellbeing Service. In the beginning, we've tried a variety of different activities, such as cooking. We use the kitchen because culturally, for this women, I'm talking about the Arabic-speaking women. Culturally, people from that background value the gathering over food to process grief and trauma. So we, in the beginning, did cooking activities, which was quite helpful. Then with it, choir. We've tried different things, but recently we've introduced a dance and movement therapy in collaboration with the Grenfell Health and Wellbeing by Yara, and that was some sort of non-verbal outlet for them, which has helped them to feel relaxed and empowered them. But also the dance and movement was very powerful in the sense that it brought a lot of emotions for them. So we will do like an hour of dance and movement, but and another hour to process what came up for them. And it was very powerful what we were able to get out of these women. the movement has brought a lot of maybe past traumas and present traumas, and maybe Yara can add to what, because she's the expert in this.
Not the expert, but yeah, so we ran 3 groups, collaboration with Al Hassaniya and DMP, Dance Therapy. And if I just like think about these groups, it seems that the stories of immigration were like a big part of it, but that always came through the movement first or the art itself. Whether it was choosing a song that, even though Arabic speaking women, that's a large community, it's all over North Africa and the Middle East. But there was this one song that I think Iman, you suggested maybe, that just became like the anthem every time we run this group. That's the first song. The women all remember when was the first time they heard it, and then things would develop, or when there were losses in the group, just movement of cooking for each other would come up without saying anything, and then we would look at that. Why is it coming up, and what does that mean in terms of the resources we have? And to go back a bit to the learning points, I think I learned a lot from this group, especially the way it started. That I read this paper that Iman and a few other Arabic-speaking therapists in the Grenfell service wrote about Hand of Hope. So it's a model of like being culturally informed and trauma informed when working with the community. And I just remember reading it and being like, yes, like for me, like, yes, that's it makes sense. Sometimes cooking is just enough, or like thinking about what do I have in my culture, because I'm also an Arab speaking, well, I'm from Lebanon, so I'm Arab. So for me, I think it gave me permission to just own the resources I have. And then even in the group being with the women and having the intergenerational conversations made me feel like something's shifting for me. Okay, so let's go more into that. And I felt like, let me just name it. Let me bring it more, own my culture more, and allow space for us to all experience it together. And I think, yeah, learning, it's allowed me really to tap in as what we already have as a community, as a culture, what's shared, all these embodied practices, cooking, dancing, moving. When someone comes in, even if they're half an hour late, we're gonna make tea and they're gonna go around and kiss everyone, and that's fine. That's all part of it. And just doing things differently. Yeah, so that's been my experience. I can talk more, but I'll pause here to give space.
Me. Can I ask a question? Yeah, of course. I mean, as you describe it, I can really get into that space. I really feel there's a sort of very beautiful space, and there's something about the cultural elements, and something also coming quite alive for you, right? On a sort of personal, cultural, social level as well. But I was also thinking, of course, there'd be some tensions around, some cultural tensions. Yeah, so I'll speak up. There'll also be some cultural tensions. There'll be something more abrasive, I guess, at times, and maybe not in the space, but maybe outside of the space. And I guess I'm wondering whether that occurred or happened or was felt, or those more, difficult moments. Because, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, they were difficult moments because, anyway, I think in any community, like from the outside, there's about like, we're all reuniting against this immigration or assimilation, but then within the community, things are not that way, and they shift. And we did have like very explicit conversation around that one time. Like something came up, and people explicitly said that they like, no, this is different. And I remember then also the conversation moving to the assumptions that we make about the togetherness, like, oh, because we're seen as this community all the same, that it's the same for all of us, and it's not. So it's just making me think about a family, like coming into therapy at the beginning and everything's great and we all are fine, and then actually you look, but once you're safe, you're able to like look more into it. and who I represent as a therapist, a Lebanese therapist coming into a Moroccan center with people from the Levantine that like neighboring or no, and yeah, so yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Yara. I'm just going to add to that as well. It took us a bit of time to psycho-educate people because they didn't understand the group setup, the therapeutic group. These individuals used to attend support groups, but therapy group was new to them. And you know, helping them understand the rules of the group and respecting one another. I think that we have encountered a few conflicts. As Yara said, it's like a family gathering where people will have different opinions and different views, but they had to respect one another. And I think from that process, we were able to identify people who needs more of individual therapy sessions, like one-to-one, because they had things to process about the group and what brought for them, because the group didn't accommodate everything. It's a process itself, but for some people they got in touch with deeper traumas and didn't have that space, the here and then, to process those traumas. But we gave them space to come in for individual therapy sessions to process what went for them. The thing about this group is that we did, as Yara said, 3 rounds, and we were hoping to do more. Because the feedback was that the women felt very empowered and released the stress without even thinking about it in depth. Did you want to add anything, Matthew?
Just talk about something that Dominic said about conflict. Now often, we had to kind of deal with conflict because the nature of our work was based in a sense of a conflict, like last Lucy. And, I think every time, it's not just about the conflict, but it's the chance we have to kind of resolve it a little bit and work through in a way. And having the arts, for me at least, that was really voicing some of the things that they couldn't be voiced for many, many reasons. They're different. Sometimes, we not that we're looking for conflict, but with the conflict comes also the opportunity to kind of work it through and hopefully resolve it, if it's internal or, in a community or in a group. And it's not easy, but Tommy can tell you a bit more about it. But in the beginning, it was still in a way about numbers, but it was about knowing how many people needed support or what was the prevalence of PTSD. So that was our numbers in a way. And later on, we needed to kind of try to find a way. But as art therapists, we've been struggling with that for a bit in a sense. But, I think over time we managed to find. Yeah.
The service overall has moved to goal-based measures, which, like, we have a really big team of arts therapists, and the goal-based measures, I don't think it's there because of us, but it does certainly help our work, because it's impossible to.
Have you heard about goal-based measure? Yeah. So it's a conversation that you have with the client when you start your clinical work, and you have time. Of course, you don't have to do it the first session, but it's about to find out what is it that is their goal that they would like to achieve at the end of therapy. Even it could be also a rough kind of idea, and then as you go with the session, you kind of try to polish it or kind of change it or see if it's still relevant. And then it's about revising it every so often, and which is I think for me it's a great way that you provide numbers for the system or data, but also you see the progress of your work, which often with our therapy we can sense it, how the people improve or how the clients, but we can't really measure it or see it, or kind of is always a little bit felt, but not really, at least for me. But maybe you want to say more.
Sorry, just want to add to what Matthew said in terms of seeking feedback. We continuously seek feedback from the participants of the group or clients accessing any kind of artwork, just to ensure the adaptation to our work is effective and relevant. And it's very important for us to do that in the beginning, middle, and end of each intervention.
In terms of someone who's received art therapy, I don't know what the terminology will be, but in terms of impact and outcomes, I think for me, having a space which was not time constrained, like when I was coming in, I started receiving art therapy, and I was saying to Ursula, I think as a white woman sitting across from me, basically nothing for like first, I don't know, like 5-6 sessions. I was just not talking to this woman. I don't know her. Like, she's like, and slowly but surely, she built that relationship with me and that trust using postcards and materials and kind of bringing in the visual arts, particularly, to form a relationship and create a space so that I started to open up and process, really. So in terms of impact, also, like for me, if I feel that if I didn't receive that therapy, I also wouldn't be able to do my day job, which is I'm a swimming teacher, and I run a community organisation which provides free swimming lessons for the community. So I feel that if I wasn't receiving this therapy, I wouldn't then be able to serve the community in that role. So I don't know outcomes. I don't know how if that as someone who's received art therapy, but yeah.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Yeah, we can
Can
hear
I
you.
just jump in a little bit because of the chat?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the goal-based measures. I just wanted to explain a little bit why we changed, because we did used to use all the normal clinical measures, you know, like the trauma screening questionnaire, the PHQ, the GAD, and we still use some of them, but we did a 2-year project to look at what measures would be appropriate for working with the community, because we promised that from the beginning, that we would work out how we would measure recovery, not in NHS terms, not in the absence of symptoms doesn't mean recovery. So we wanted to really work, and so we brought in service user consultants. We did surveys of clients, current clients and past ones, even some that had dropped out, just to see, because the verbal feedback we were getting was that they didn't resonate. And a lot of the questions that we asked in questionnaires, the wording didn't make sense. All these sorts of things, and my own lived experience of working of going to SLAM for trauma therapy and having to fill out 9 questionnaires each session, most of which I thought were rubbish. So we did a 2-year project. It turns out that to try and co-produce basically what the recovery is for each person, we couldn't really dictate a questionnaire or any of the ones that had already been chosen. So we went with goal-based measures so that each person could create their own idea of recovery and way to get there. And then it took us probably a year to even get it on the system. So whenever you try and change something in the NHS, it gets a bit difficult system-wise. But that's how we ended up with it. So we've started probably 2 years ago with goal-based measures. And that's the only one we reported on. We didn't want to report on recovery rates based on what other people had told us was recovery.
I mean, that's quite a profound innovation. I'm still sort of hearing it. You know, it's quite, in terms, so completely.
It was a bit hardcore.
Yeah, pretty hardcore. So from completely co-produced outcomes. So you know, the person comes along, you are simply saying, what do you need to change given what's happened? And the person says, well, this is important to me, and the therapist says, well, how long do we need to work with that? And that's decided between them, which is kind of pretty radical. I mean, and I guess thinking about it, it does feel a bit like. Sorry?
It's already used in children's as well, so it was
still
a bit
used
of
in
a gold
services.
standard.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was a bit easier to sell.
Yeah, absolutely. But in adult services, it's usually, of course, being goals and aims and so forth. But because it's usually a mental service contextualized within psychiatry, which is system focused, we're then looking at symptom change. There's a kind of linear trajectory and a time frame for that, and so it's a sort of radically different way of thinking about people. That is perhaps not a linear path, and perhaps they might not frame these things as being symptoms, and perhaps they're more complex and nuanced, and that maybe there isn't always the best fit between traditional models of psychiatry and what needs to be offered in terms of recovery, changes in health, well-being, and the kind of contextual things that aren't always considered. So it does lead me to also wonder how the NHS can learn from this project. But it's like, which maybe is a big question, but there's a lot of kind of is swimming against the current of a lot of services, particularly in adult services. I think children's services are a little bit different, but particularly in adult services. So
co-production, which is part of the goal-based measure. Everything that happens, co-production, and everything that happens in our service is co-produced. It probably means it takes long, but and there's a lot of back and forth. But it is all. It never. It's not dictated. It's all considered, and always feedback. Like Lucy was saying, with developing the goal-based measures, the suits were involved. Even with community connectors, doing some of the art projects that we have created, they've been really big part of it. And constantly going back to the community, the Healing Space Together project, which was where we brought in Lana and Anna to our office to develop it. Some of the feedback that they gave at the end of it was really understanding what production is because of the constant back and forth. Do you want to say more about that?
Sure. Yeah, I think back to kind of Paula's question, like what's the learning is really what learning from the community is kind of at every step. And I know it was a bit of a like kind of rushed tour of the things that we were doing, but and it really, like you said, Dominic, it's like being with, like we entered into situations and we were being what was there, and we were speaking to people and kind of create things together. So that has kind of been a thread all the way through. And I think the Healing Space Together project was, we really took away any kind of leading from the front, and all the different kind of people involved, including the participants and staff, we all came together to decide what was going to happen. And it was a frustrating experience, and I think it can be when you don't have a very clear kind of idea of where you're going, but you have a commitment to go where you want to go, and everyone's kind of inside of that commitment, whether or not it's staying till 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, thinking how are we going to move to the next step, because we need to move to the next step, and thinking about that together. And I think it's been quite a common theme in my work or our work throughout this whole time, is kind of sitting with and kind of saying what is required, what is needed, rather than kind of hold back and go, well, no, I'm an NHS worker, so I won't do that, or I'm wearing this t-shirt, so I won't do that. But it's more like, okay, so let's have a conversation about how it will work, like meeting an artist in the community and saying, well, can I support you? And then ended up kind of working together till, on a project that you weren't expecting to happen, and learning from different members of the community and different partners like that. So yeah, that's my biggest learning, I think.
Can I add one more thing? I think co-production within the team as well, because we're such a big service and there's such a wealth of experience. And one of the groups that I worked on recently was with a group of trained women, and I think learning for me in that, which was a very different experience to how you described the hope, was being able to have Reem, the trained heritage assistant psychologist, be part of that group, and also bringing in some of the trainees, the DNP trainees, our therapy trainees last year. And it's the co-production within the service and within our team, as well as with the community.
Yeah, just wanted to add something. I think the collaboration as well is very, very important in co-producing a design service for a certain section of the community. I think it was important for they affected people to, especially within my role, working culturally with Arabic speaking women, is that it was very important to offer something relatable to them, culturally attuned for them, because it's the way they understood psychological help, and bringing people from Grenfell Tower and being service. It's almost like a collaboration to teach maybe people who did not have the cultural sensitivity to become more competent in delivering something very cultural to people. I think when we did our training as mental health practitioners, the cultural appropriation is not always included in the training. So you learn as you work, as you live the experience with people, and you listen to their needs, and therefore it was important to collaborate and teach one another how we can provide designed interventions to people. Sorry.
We're going to have to close this section in a moment. But the last question is particularly important. I would like a response to that, because in a way, as I was thinking this through, it's a kind of radical service. It's a sort of radical co-produced approach to therapies. And there's a risk, of course, that this was a phase, this was an event, this was a situation, and now we move on to practice as usual. But this kind of, in many areas, should be practice as usual. And I guess I'm just wondering how this is going to continue, what its legacy is, whether there's scope for this to be an ongoing kind of impact on the wider context and thinking about other communities or other ways of working. I don't know if there's an answer to that, but and maybe just have 1 minute for this, but it feels like a big question, but potentially a huge loss. Does anybody want to answer this in 1 minute?
I can just say a quick thing, and someone can carry on. I think about that a lot, because what happened shouldn't have happened. But there's also lots of resources here, and a privilege to be able, for me personally, to learn from working in Grenfell about what do you do after something like this happens. Because in other places, things like that happen constantly, and there are no resources. So for me, actually, that's always on my mind. But how to do it, I'm not sure yet. But yeah, I think there's loads to learn, and move forward with.
Is there anything you need from the people listening? Anything you'd like them to think about? Should be to collaborate with.
I think there's a lot of uncertainty about the sustainability of the service, that we put too much energy and investment into creating it, in terms of the community funding, and so there's a lot of anxiety about what's going to happen in the future. So I'm not too sure. So resources are not, but that may be going to be there in the near future.
Okay, so there's a lot of uncertainty about the future of the Grenfell Wellbeing Service. But what we do know, and what I've heard, is that there's been innovation, there's been a journey, there's been you've come to a place where you can authentically, in many situations, co-produce therapies and produce meaningful change. And so I just want to, before we move on and have a break, I just want to give you a huge round of applause and thank you so much for being so brave and so amazing. So we're going to have about 10 minutes break now, before we do our next thing, which is, what is our next thing? We're going to do a workshop. Okay. What will the people online do? What are the people online doing during the workshop?
So they could, people online, for you guys, I will tell you a little bit, the one remotely, you're gonna have to adapt the activities. So I will suggest to have you basic arts material if you have, or just pen and paper and a few other bits, and you can just create, your own response to this evening. But in here, we're gonna do something a little bit different, which I will introduce you after the break, if it's okay. Yeah.
Matteo, we missed the beginning of your.
Sorry, just say that for people online, we had to kind of adapt the activity because you're not here and you're on your own. So I wanted to ask you if you could just, create an image or a piece using very simple material that you might have, even just some paper or pen, or if you have some colors. And you can, create just a response to what we were talking about or the images that you saw far. But person gonna do something a little different. So it's okay, yeah.
Was consideration given to co-production / art therapies collaboration with residents and emergency service workers who attended the incident, or is it better to keep these processes separate?
Yeah.
So cast the I mean, I'm talking about this and I wasn't there at the time, but the emergency services and the first responders did originally access the service, but then CAST was set up, the Centre for Anxiety and Stress, which is specifically for those. And I think is it right that was in response to the community feeling like the two couldn't be in the same place? Yeah. So yes, it was part of the initial response from the NHS, but then it got, because it needed to be separated.
When I started, I like the idea that we're doing it like silent, but at the same time I felt like the unity of doing something together, but at the same time the sadness inside of what I've heard and everything that what I've seen in the song in the beginning, it's just all the emotions together, like the unity and the love and the caring and the sadness all together. I feel like it was a good depict of the whole experience. I feel like the culture and everything, just like inviting others, and I don't know, it touched me really hard, like the piece itself, especially that it's like muted, but at the same time there is this unity and helping each other, basically. Yeah.
Thanks. The one thing I thought is imposed silence, and that reminded of the comments about how the resident couldn't talk about their experiences because they felt that would impact other residents. So that was in my mind as we worked on it silently, and also how they just focused on everyday things, not about psychological impact or anything, but just getting something done. So that was in my mind as I was doing that.
Important part of what we were trying to do with art therapy as well, to give this voice to the most vulnerable and also the children that they but also the more vulnerable people in the community, and that as we heard for years they've been kind of deprived and opportunities. And if anyone.
So there's an image from somebody online. Did you say it was Joanna? Joanna, I'm not sure.
Yes,
Joanna.
yes. Hello.
Hi, Joanna.
It's an image from me. Sorry, I need to have my camera off today. But listening to you all and just just reflecting on my own crisis interventions, I thought that sometimes it's really about building this tower or a structure that really is unstable, and very often it's like almost collapsing, but we keep building. So this is my reflection of imagining together some kind of change, some kind of future, just trying to build over and over again. So thank you very much, and I participated and so yeah, just a great learning experience to witness all of you and to listen to what you've said. Thanks.
It's an amazing image. We're just looking at it now as a group. And so as you're saying, I'm just going to repeat because some people may not have heard, but it's something about the precarity of this structure that you're continually working at, right? It's something like a tower, but and there's something quite vibrant and powerful about it, by the looks of things, with the Hokusai waves and this explosion, the sense of being together. But there's also this fragility. Is that right? Is that something like this?
Yes, and I'm not sure if you hear me well, but yes, exactly. This is what I meant, and yeah, I'm just taken by this constant process of adjusting, of answering to the needs of our clients, to the needs of the groups that we facilitate, just constantly building and changing and readjusting, and sometimes those structures unfortunately collapse due to external circumstances. So yeah, just my reflection on that. Thanks again.
Okay, and that's one of the themes that came up earlier about the potential collapse or the loss, and what you're describing is this constant attendance to keeping this this kind of healing or recovery structure alive. But so we've heard a little bit about some of the theory, some of the history, the kind of geographical history, the cultural histories. We've heard about the process of being therapists in that kind of environment. We've also heard from one of the people who was participating in art therapies. So in a way, you've heard from management, from the therapists, from the supervisor, from participants. Yeah, it's kind of it's a lot in a way, right? How are people left feeling?
Content.
Impressed. It's definitely not one word, but something about residue and what's left over. I was going to say reflective as well. So I'll sit with reflective.
I guess something about kind of pouring out and being in the flow.
I'm thinking about how often death brings people together as a community, and that is what really unites people, very tragically, but yeah, just how that's kind of what I've taken away.
Singing together, in contrast to how it started in silence, but at the beginning we heard a song. So
I'm not sure if I have a word, so I'll do a movement instead. It was just like,
yeah.
I think care is my main word.
Together is my main word.
Yeah, I'm copying you, coming together, and I'm thinking of the way the community pulled together at the time, and the way the services in the aftermath then pulled together, and that just, coming together, collaboration.
I feel like something is going from the witness of trauma, and I also was quite impressed by the non-verbal collective unconscious connection.
Thank you. I feel grateful. That's what I want to say.
Hopeful. My word is witnessing.
Connected.
Proud.
Becoming with. Thank you. Maybe on here. Okay. So we're just going to say a few words to people who are here live with us. So some of the words that are coming online are opening and closing. Need to be listening, attuned, moving, walking together. Somebody said it was an inspiring event. Really great to be with you here. If there's any more sort of thoughts, reflections online, please do share them. It does feel quite moving somehow. Yeah. So, yeah, maybe we'll end. Any last comments, reflections before we close? So this is also an ending for the seminar series. So I'm so grateful you've all made it today and made this contribution. It has been a very powerful kind of session. I said session there because it somehow felt like we were in the mix, and I guess that's a reflection of the work they did in Grenfell, with the Grenfell community, somewhere being in the mix of it. And so I'm left with this sense of buoyancy, but also a lot of feelings, which is kind of interesting. So again, I just want to thank all the people who made a huge contribution today. The therapists who have been on a huge journey, and this is in a way we've just heard like glimpses of what it was like to be in that space. But thank you so much. So yeah, so. I also want to thank Lucy Wood, who was managing the service and giving a lot of really emotionally intelligent leadership, something we need much more of in some areas. So for Lucy Wood as well. Serinia, who was a participant in art therapy, who gave such sort of open, brave reflections on her own experience. And I think that's quite something. I know I would probably struggle to do that, to bring my own therapy into a public space. So I really want to have a big round of applause for her. Atefa, who has been behind the scenes organising, coordinating and helping us. I just want to thank you very much. Davide Pudu, who couldn't make it tonight, but has also been very instrumental. He does all the bookings and support around it. So thank you very much to Davide. I don't think he's here, but and Jenny, who is leading or managing ICAP, to the International Centre for Art Psychotherapy and Training, which also supports this program of seminars. So Jenny, please. And honestly, very lastly, just to say thank you so much for CNWL NHS Foundation Trust for kind of promoting this innovation, for saying actually this can happen, having a vision about it, embracing new ways of working. I think that's just finding spaces where this can happen. Also Brunel University for funding and supporting it and providing the kind of context where this can happen, this seminar tonight. So just thank you to the organizations who are forward thinking. Yeah, so thank you. One last. Anybody else want to add to my thank you list? I'm sure I've left somebody out there. So.
I don't want to add to the thank you list, but there are some booklets about the service.
Oh yes, please take one with you. So we have booklets and pamphlets about the service. The other thing you can take with you or have it now is some food. So we actually finally have food here, so we can be grateful for that. For those online, thank you so much for attending. I hope you enjoyed it. We're really pleased to be able to hold these hybrid events. We hope to hold more in the future. Do stay in touch. We will be advertising through the usual modes of sort of marketing, both by email, LinkedIn and other places. But great that you could join us. And we look forward to seeing you again in the future.